On February 29, 1960, in El Paso, Texas, Julian and Mercedes Ramirez welcomed their youngest child, Ricardo Leyva Munoz Ramirez, into the world. He was born on a leap year, a quirk of fate that would become just one footnote in a life destined for infamy. Richard, as he came to be known, was the fifth child in a large Mexican-American family living on the fringes of poverty. Julian worked for the Santa Fe Railroad, a demanding job that kept him away from home and left him exhausted and irritable. He was known to have a violent temper, often taking out his frustrations on his children with physical beatings. Richard's mother, Mercedes, worked in a factory where she was exposed to chemical fumes while pregnant with Richard, a factor that some later speculated might have impacted his neurological development. As a child, Richard suffered several head injuries. One incident occurred when a dresser fell on him, leaving him unconscious. Later, he was struck in the head by a swing at a park. These injuries resulted in repeated blackouts and epileptic seizures, further isolating him from other children. By adolescence, Richard's demeanor had changed noticeably. He became quiet and withdrawn, prone to fits of rage, and began to cultivate a fascination with death, violence, and the occult. But one influence loomed larger than any other: his cousin Miguel, or Mike Ramirez. Mike was a decorated Green Beret who'd served in Vietnam, but his time in the jungle left him deeply scarred and twisted. When Mike returned to El Paso, he regaled young Richard with horrific stories of torture, rape, and murder. Mike even showed Richard photographs of Vietnamese women he had raped and beheaded. To Richard, these gruesome tales were intoxicating. One afternoon in 1973, while a 13-year-old Richard sat in the room, Mike shot his wife Jessie in the face during an argument, killing her instantly. Blood splattered across the kitchen. Richard stood frozen, absorbing every detail. Mike was arrested but was eventually found not guilty by reason of insanity and committed to a mental institution. This incident left an indelible mark on Richard. His adolescent mind fused violence and sexual arousal, forming a deadly cocktail that would drive his future crimes. As a teenager, Richard began experimenting with drugs, marijuana, then later cocaine and LSD. He developed a fascination with heavy metal music and satanic imagery. He worked briefly at a local Holiday Inn, where he was fired for attempting to sexually assault a woman in her hotel room. Seeking escape from El Paso and perhaps the ghosts that haunted him there, Richard moved to California in his early 20s. He drifted between Los Angeles and San Francisco, living in cheap motels and surviving by stealing cars, robbing houses, and dealing drugs. His physical appearance was striking: a thin, tall young man with high cheekbones, intense dark eyes, and long black hair. Yet, those who looked closer noted his rotting teeth, poor hygiene, and increasingly vacant stare. By the spring of 1984, Richard Ramirez was ready to cross a line from petty crime into pure predation. On April 10, 1984, Richard Ramirez committed his first known murder. The victim was 9-year-old May Lung, who was tragically killed in San Francisco's Tenderloin district. The case went unsolved for many years until DNA evidence linked Ramirez to the crime in 2009. Later that year, he returned to Los Angeles, where his most infamous crimes began. On June 28, 1984, 79-year-old Jenny Vincow was found murdered in her apartment in Glassell Park, the scene showing signs of extreme violence. At first, investigators believed it was an isolated incident, but in March 1985, a series of attacks marked the beginning of a chilling crime spree. On March 17, 1985, Ramirez attacked 22-year-old Maria Hernandez outside her Rosemead home. She survived, but her roommate, Dale Okazaki, was fatally shot. That same night, Ramirez assaulted another woman, Tsai Lian Veronica Yu, in Monterey Park, resulting in her death. These incidents shocked the public, and fear quickly spread across Los Angeles. The seemingly random nature of the crimes, combined with the diversity of the victims, left residents feeling increasingly unsafe. On March 27, Ramirez entered the home of Vincent and Maxine Zazara in Whittier. He shot 64-year-old Vincent as he slept. Maxine, 44, was awakened by the noise. Richard beat her, bound her, and demanded to know where valuables were kept. When she broke free and grabbed a shotgun from under the bed, she discovered it was unloaded. Furious, Ramirez shot her 3 times, then mutilated her body, stabbing her repeatedly and gouging out her eyes, which he placed in a jewelry box to take as trophies. The mutilation signaled to investigators that they were dealing with a killer whose violence was not merely practical, but deeply sadistic and ritualistic. The press began referring to the unknown killer as the Valley Intruder, then, more ominously, the Night Stalker. Ramirez often broke into homes at night through open windows or unlocked doors, surprising his victims as they slept. He used a range of weapons: guns, knives, tire irons, hammers, and forced his victims to swear allegiance to Satan. He left behind scenes of almost unimaginable violence. On May 14th, he bound and assaulted Bill Doy, 66, then sexually assaulted Bill's wife, Lillian, 56, before fatally shooting Bill. On May 29, he attacked sisters Ruth Wilson and her 12-year-old son in Burbank, forcing Ruth to perform sexual acts while threatening her child. He ransacked the house and stole valuables. On July 2, he severely beat Mary Louise Cannon, 75, and then slit her throat. The list of victims grew almost weekly, each attack more brutal than the last. Ramirez would often force female victims to perform sexual acts and then either kill them or leave them alive to tell the tale. Sometimes he spared children, ordering them to stay in bed while he killed their parents. The randomness was what terrified people most. Unlike other serial killers, Ramirez did not stick to a particular type. Young, old, wealthy, poor, everyone was vulnerable. During many assaults, Ramirez demanded that victims swear to Satan. He drew pentagrams on walls and on his own hand. He spoke of serving Lucifer and claimed demonic forces protected him. These occult flourishes fueled a satanic panic in the media. Sensational headlines screamed of devil worship, and televangelists seized on Ramirez's crimes as evidence of moral decay. Ramirez seemed to revel in this reputation, cultivating his image as a night-prowling emissary of evil. By summer 1985, law enforcement was under tremendous pressure. Communities organized neighborhood watches. Hardware stores sold out of locks and guns, and people slept with baseball bats beside their beds. A key break came after Ramirez stole a Toyota and left his fingerprints inside. Investigators matched the prints to a petty criminal named Richard Ramirez, who had prior arrests for auto theft and drug possession. On August 30, police released Ramirez's photo to the media. By the next day, his face was on the front page of every newspaper in California. On August 31, 1985, Ramirez returned to Los Angeles by bus after visiting his brother in Tucson. Unaware that he was now the most wanted man in California, he stepped off the bus in East LA and immediately noticed people staring at him. Someone yelled, "El Matón, the killer!" Realizing he'd been recognized, Ramirez attempted to flee through backyards and over fences, but the neighborhood mobilized against him. Citizens chased him down, hitting him with pipes and restraining him until police arrived. Officers dragged the bloodied Ramirez to safety from an angry crowd that seemed ready to beat him to death. Ramirez's trial would become one of the most sensational in California history. Spectators lined up daily, hoping for a glimpse of the man who terrorized the state. During his arraignment, he raised his hand to show a pentagram drawn on his palm and shouted, "Hail Satan!" The trial was long, marred by legal delays and bizarre disruptions. Women in the courtroom sometimes dressed provocatively, hoping to catch the killer's attention. Ramirez would flirt with admirers and blow kisses in court. On September 20, 1989, after over 4 years in jail awaiting trial, Ramirez was convicted of 13 counts of murder, 5 attempted murders, 11 sexual assaults, and 14 burglaries. When the judge sentenced him to death, Ramirez smirked and said, "Big deal, Death always went with the territory. See you in Disneyland. Following his conviction, Ramirez was sent to San Quentin State Prison. He remained on death row for more than 2 decades, appealing his sentence and soaking up his infamy. While incarcerated, he married Doreen Leo, a magazine editor who fell in love with him through correspondence. Despite his crimes, Ramirez attracted a legion of groupies fascinated by his dark charisma. Yet his health began to fail. He suffered from chronic infections, hepatitis C, and other ailments, exacerbated by years of drug use and poor hygiene. On June 7, 2013, Richard Ramirez died of complications from B-cell lymphoma at Marin General Hospital in Green Bay, California. He was 53 years old. At the time of his death, he was still awaiting execution. Richard Ramirez's reign of terror left an indelible scar on California's collective memory. His crimes were monstrous, not merely for their violence, but for their utter unpredictability. He invaded homes, the place where people felt safest, and violated every sense of security. He was a predator driven by sex, sadism, and an obsession with death and Satanism. His willingness to kill anyone of any age or background made him one of the most terrifying serial killers in American history.